The woman used the drone to monitor my land, saying it was for the safety of the community. By the time I realized it, she was overstepping her bounds. Living on a ranch means accepting that the world moves at a different pace. Mornings don't start with a horn, but with the smell of wet grass. The noises don't come from neighbors arguing, but from cattle ruminating, chickens announcing the sun, and the wind hitting the tarpaulin of the shed. And that, for me, was always paradise. Until that woman came along. She was the kind of neighbor who seems to have come out of a sitcom about perfect families, only with a soul programmed to disturb. She bought a property in the same association as mine, a place in the middle of nowhere, where the houses are separated by hectares, and the idea of community was more about respecting each other's silence than chatting. Only she didn't understand the concept, or pretended not to, which is even worse. She arrived saying she wanted to put down roots and live off the land, but her first request to the HOA was to modernize surveillance procedures. Translation? Put rules on top of what wasn't hers. And that, in the field, sounds as offensive as pouring poison into well water. In the beginning, she appeared with those papers full of technical terms, talking about visual boundaries, rural security monitoring, and territorial transparency. Nice words to justify what she really wanted, to stick her nose where it didn't belong. At first I tried to ignore it. People like that thrive on attention. But one day, I noticed something in the sky. A buzzing sound, small, insistent, like an electric fly circling above the barn. I looked up. There it was, a drone, small, white, with little lights flashing on the tips of its propellers, hovering over my field as if it were buying land in the air. At that moment, my blood ran hot. It wasn't just a weekend toy. It was an expensive model with a high-definition camera, and it was clearly taking a forced tour of everything I owned. The paddock, the pond, the shed, and even the back porch, where I usually sit to drink my coffee in peace. I waited. I gave it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a mistake, a stray visitor. I don't know. But the next day, there he was again. And the next day, too. Each time more daring, flying lower. One day, it flew so close to my head that I could almost read the mark. It didn't take much to know where it was coming from. Only one person there would have the pleasure of flying a drone with a smile on their face, and the excuse, it's just to ensure safety. Of course, security for her to see how many bags of feed I unloaded, who I spoke to at the gate, how many times a week I tilled the soil. When I tried to talk to her, she let out a pearl. You know these drones are free to fly, right? As long as they don't film inside the house. It's not trespassing. Do you know what trespassing is? A piece of plastic with 4 propellers floating over my roof every day, recording more of my routine than any reality show camera. But of course, she thought it was natural. For her, everything that was in the name of order counted, even at the cost of other people's privacy. I began to lose patience. I'm not one to call the police, let alone the HOA, which in this case seemed more concerned with the color of the fence than with aerial espionage. And that's when I had an idea. That same day, while servicing the agricultural sprayer, I leaned against it and felt the weight of the solution. It was a beautiful machine, with a wide nozzle, adjustable pressure, a jet with a reach that would make even a pigeon think twice before flying low. I thought, why not? I planned everything calmly. I adjusted the range, tested the response time, and prepared the mixture. Nothing toxic, of course. It didn't have to hurt. Just teach. A lesson in the form of revenge steam. I waited for the right day. Bright sunshine, clear skies, no clouds to cast a shadow. Around 10 in the morning, I heard the familiar sound, the buzzing sound. I looked up and saw the creature hovering, approaching the barn, just like it always did. I went to the sprayer, which was already positioned as if it wanted nothing. I started the engine, adjusted the jet, and waited for the right moment. The drone began to descend, curious as ever. It passed the shed and hovered right in the center of the courtyard. I aimed precisely, and I pressed the button. The jet rose like a giant tongue of liquid justice. It hit the bullseye. The drone spun once, then again, lost control and fell in a spiral of smoke, landing with a dry thud in the middle of the mud, splashing fertilizer everywhere. I approached calmly. The drone was shaking, still trying to stay alive, like a fish out of water. I grabbed a shovel and shoveled it into an old bucket. I took it to the shed and left it to dry in the sun, like a wet rag. At lunchtime, I received a message, a familiar number. "Have you seen a drone lying around?" I replied with a photo. The drone, covered in spray residue, on a wooden board with the caption, "Trespasser detected. Area protected." The woman remained silent. For the first time, there was no letter, no justification, no threat of prosecution, just silence. And that was just the beginning. In the days following the shooting, the mood in the neighborhood changed. The woman disappeared, not physically, but from her usual behavior. No walks along the fence, no fake visits with HOA leaflets under her arm. She disappeared like a dog that runs away after knocking over the garbage. The kind of silence that comes more from wounded pride than a guilty conscience. The news spread fast, not because anyone told, but because the sound of the drone crashing was heard halfway down the country road. And where there's a fence, there's an ear to the ground. The closest people asked, with that little smile at the corner of their mouths, feigning innocence, "Boy, I heard there was a technological accident around here. Is it true?" I smiled and shrugged. Sometimes the wind blows the wrong way, but she wasn't going to let it go. On Friday, an envelope with the HOA stamp arrived, a document folded with such formality that it looked like a wedding invitation. Inside, a notice. "We request clarification of an incident that occurred involving the personal monitoring equipment of an associate resident." In other words, she tried to formalize the bullshit. She wanted to turn a soggy drone into a legal case. She wanted to use the association as a porcelain shield after being beaten by reality. But anyone who lives in the country knows, paper doesn't hold hail, let alone consequences. I went to the HOA headquarters on Monday, not out of fear, but out of pleasure. I wanted to look the bureaucrats in the face who sign paper as coldly as they ignore the sound of propellers on other people's ranches. The meeting was quick. 3 members sat down, trying to appear impartial. She, on the other side of the table, wearing sunglasses, just inside the room. The posture of someone who has rehearsed the speech 1,000 times in the mirror. "We're here because personal property has been destroyed and used within the legal limits of the association's air regulations," I interrupted, calmly. "Regulations that allow you to fly over property without the owner's permission?" They looked at each other. One snorted. Another pretended to read the paper again. She tried to smile, but her mouth trembled. There was no direct trespassing, just external overflights for security purposes. "Whose security?" I asked, because I was the one who felt threatened, with a camera following me around like a mosquito on a hot day. The HOA closed without a conclusion. They said they would evaluate the case carefully. In other words, they didn't have the courage to defend her absurdity, but they didn't want to appear useless either. In the end, no one was punished. And for me, that was a victory. But the woman didn't know when to stop. A week later, she installed a sign on her fence, facing my ranch, a piece of metal, well painted, with raised letters, "Monitored area. Aerial recording permitted by community right." It looked comical. But what made me angrier was the desperate attempt to feign control, as if sticking a sign in the ground was going to erase the embarrassment it had caused. The neighborhood reacted, just not in the way she expected. 2 days later, another sign appeared, in front of the entrance to the street, stuck to a fence post, written with a thick brush on a rough piece of wood, "He who has wings flies, but he who has sense lands." No one claimed authorship, and that was for the best, because now she wasn't just facing my patience, she was facing collective common sense. The people on the farm next door started to look at it differently. Before, the gang would only comment quietly. Now they were joking out loud. One of them drove by on a tractor and shouted, "Are you going to let the drone take another spin, or are you going to plant it in the ground for good?" She heard. She pretended it wasn't her business, but she didn't show her face again for a long time. The drone, they said, was unusable. The parts broke down. The lens was cracked. She tried to have it repaired, but it seems that not even the service department wanted to deal with the smell of fertilizer that was impregnated. I started making the sprayer visible at all times, parked out front, shining in the sun, as a reminder. I didn't need to activate it again. What she needed to understand was that here, respect doesn't come from the drone's manual. It comes on the basis of turn it on. A week after the stupid sign, the woman changed tactics. She left the role of airborne guardian of morals and began to paint herself as the wronged party. Her narrative became a sad samba about how she was assaulted by a neighbor's hostile attitudes, had her equipment destroyed out of sheer hatred, and just wanted to help improve security in the area. Suddenly, where once there had been a meddling woman, now there was an aspiring martyr. She swapped HOA flyers for posts on neighborhood Facebook groups, long texts full of heartbroken emojis talking about how difficult it is to be a woman in a leadership position and how the hatred of the countryside still exists against progress. The funniest part was seeing who enjoyed it. Only people who never set foot on the ranch, people who live in a condominium with an electronic gate, and think that a rooster crowing in the morning is an authentic rural experience. Those who think that a beaten floor is a decoration and not a floor at all. Meanwhile, those who really lived there, those with dirty boots and calluses on their hands, began to move away. The woman thought she was gaining allies. In fact, she was losing the respect of even the caretaker's dog. Her ranch, once full of movement, fell silent. She stopped having those noisy meetings, the friends who came for energy retreats, and the exaggerated walks in straw hats just to pose for a selfie. The camera on her gate, which used to rotate like Big Brother's eye, remained pointing at the ground for days. But her pride still wasn't satisfied. In the most pathetic attempt yet, she had a new drone installed. That's right, she bought another one. Same brand, new model, this time with GPS and programmed route. Words that came out of her mouth during a whisper that she made a point of releasing in front of 3 residents, just to make it look like she was back in the game. Only now, no one had any patience left. The first flight was a fiasco. The drone went up, circled over her land, and, when it tried to cross my pasture line, 3 rifles were already at the ready. Nobody fired, nor did they need to. The mere fact that 3 men were standing silently with the barrels of their guns pointed at the sky was enough to leave the drone spinning like a cockroach until it returned to the ground on its own. She saw it. She was on the balcony, with her hand on her waist and her cell phone in the other. She just didn't know who to call. The police? To say that 3 men had given her little toy the stink eye? HOA? That she didn't want to get involved in this dung-scented Mexican soap opera? The drone never went up again. But the worst thing for her wasn't even that. It was knowing that no one there believed her story anymore. That now, anything she did was viewed with suspicion. One resident even said he was thinking of putting up a sign too. Area free of drones, lies, and drama. People began to avoid even passing in front of her property. When they did, they looked up like someone looking for a hidden camera. The delivery trucks stopped honking at the gate and started leaving the packages on the neighbor's property, who would then drive by and throw them over the fence with pity. And she started to fall off her heels. Literally. She stopped wearing long dresses and stylish hats and went back to faded leggings and a baggy t-shirt. The pose disappeared. The brisk, confident walk turned into a quick step and a bowed head. But what struck me most was a small detail. One late afternoon, out of nowhere, she appeared at the edge of the fence with a bag in her hand. She bent down, threw what looked like alpiste on the ground, and stood there, watching the birds. Only there were no birds, no sound, no wind, Just her and the emptiness of trying to look at peace. That's when one of the farmers from the ranch next door drove by on a tractor and shouted, "Careful, girl! If the drone comes down, the rooster will get him again." The laughter came out loud and true, like a slap in the middle of her loneliness. She pretended not to hear, but she couldn't disguise her face. That expression of someone who knows they've become the laughing stock of the street. She thought the ranch was a stage set. She discovered in the most painful way that here, the stage belongs to those who respect the audience. Her departure was unannounced. There was no "for sale" sign, no official visit from the realtor. It was as if she had understood that there, in that red earth where every neighbor knows when the rain changes direction, you don't plant control with a propeller and a face of superiority. The ranch began to change discreetly. First, the drone's license plate disappeared. In its place, only the empty post, as if it hadn't even existed. Then, the main entrance was locked with a chain. Even during the day, a whole day went by without any movement. And that's when the buzz started. They say he's leaving, that he's packed up everything inside. I hear he's given up planting lavender, and now all he cares about is urban rentals. She's got flying bug trauma. It seems she even scares birds away now. The neighborhood treated her disappearance as if it were the end of a bad series. Nobody missed her. Nobody cared. And yet everyone was waiting for the last episode. The moment when the gate would open and she would leave for good, with the expression of someone who understood that respect is earned in silence and lost at the first invasive buzz. The final scene took place on a colorless morning. The kind of morning when even the sun doesn't want to get in the way. A small removal truck, with no logo, drove slowly down the dirt track. It stopped in front of the house. Two men got off and started loading boxes. No sound, no words, no music, no conversation. Just the creak of wood being stacked and the dry click of doors slamming. She appeared shortly afterwards, wearing a gray sweatshirt, her hair tied back in any way. No makeup, no character, just the raw woman, naked of vanity, trying to disappear in the same way she tried to dominate, without permission. She walked quickly through the entrance, holding a small bag and her cell phone. She looked away once, at my ranch, where the sprayer was still there, parked in the same position since the day of the accident. She didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes gave it away. That mixture of contained anger and swallowed humiliation that only those who have made a mistake without having the courage to admit it carry. The last to leave was the truck driver. He tied up the tarpaulin, tapped the bodywork twice, and got into the cab. The engine rumbled, kicking up dust, and when the vehicle turned the bend in the road, the whole ranch felt lighter. After the departure, peace returned with force. Her fence was abandoned for weeks. The house was closed up. The plants dried up. The weeds climbed over the edge of the veranda. The only visitors were a few birds that she had previously tried to scare away. Irony of fate. The only creatures that flew around freely now were the ones she couldn't control. The neighborhood treated her departure as a rebirth. No one spoke ill of it. No one celebrated loudly. But the mood changed. The dust settled. The road became redder, more alive, as if the ground had finally shed a weight that it didn't recognize as part of itself. I put up a simple, handmade sign on the edge of my driveway, made from scrap wood. All it said was, "You don't film here, you live here." A gentleman from the property next door rode by and read it out loud. He laughed. Straight to the point, the way it should be. Now, when I hear a buzzing in the sky, I don't even move. Because it's not a drone. It's normal life. It's a bug. It's wind. It's time passing without artificial surveillance. She tried to dominate from above, but she learned the hard way that in the countryside, those who don't respect the earth don't take root. If you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.